PhysioEd, welcoming you all. Today we have Dr. Amresh Chakre sir to enlighten us on the webinar topic which we are organizing behalf of this organization on professional etiquettes and code of conduct. Dr. Amresh Chakre sir is a founder and CEO at PhysioEd. He has completed his master's in musculoskeletal and sports from prestigious Kelly's Belgaum in 2008 under RGH's institution. Sir is a certified Mulligan concept practitioner and also internationally certified COMT and peripheral joint mobilization from prestigious Melbourne University, Australia. He is also certified at McConnell concept practitioner and has learned from Jenny McConnell herself. He is also certified as a kinesiotaping practitioner from Kinesio University. He is internationally certified ergonomic practitioner. He has conducted all over thousands of ergonomic training sessions in leading companies in Pune, that is in India. He has all over 16 years of experience in India as well as in overseas, including academic and the clinical practice. So we are really honored to have sir with our platform over here. Sir is a lecturer. Sir was a lecturer at Physiotherapy College in Surat from 2008 and 19. After that, sir was an associate professor at Sinhagad Institution, Kashibai Navle Physiotherapy College, that was in Pune from 2009 to 2013. And he was also as an associate professor as DES Brijlal Jindal Physiotherapy College in Pune from 2013 to 2018. Sir is currently a site lead working as a clinical physiotherapist in a geriatric Australia. He is a recipient of a Care Hero Award for Best Employee in his company for the New South Wales state in Australia 2020. His aim is to help the physiotherapists across the globe have easier access to eminent clinically skilled resources, professionals. So let's get started, and I'll give over to Amresh Chakre sir so that we can proceed with the prestigious session with him, and hope it leads to the interaction with him. So whosoever has queries can ask him, and we can have a interactive session with him. Thank you, sir. Please proceed.
Yeah, I would like to thank Dr. Ajay Kumar sir for giving me the opportunity to present and be a part of the World Physio Day celebration at the college. Also, I would like to take the opportunity to thank Dr. Preeti to coordinate the session and to get it started. So without wasting any further time, because it's I think we are a bit on time, just over time, I guess. So we'll start it off. Firstly, it's afternoon and the topic is ethics, and both these combinations don't go well. So post-lunch, reading or studying ethics is the worst time to do it, because ethics normally is a sort of a sedative. So I would like it to be more an interaction rather than me, talking or reading the PowerPoint presentation, because if you actually go through the PowerPoint presentation, which I'm going to share now, there's a lot of content which is might be a bit heavy for this time of the day, which I don't want it to be. So I would like it to be more like an interaction, more like a communication between me and students. Like I always love to interact with students because they are the ones who come up with new ideas, and people like me who passed a few years back, or even sir, or even Dr. Preeti who passed a few years back, there's a bit of difference there. So let's get started and get into the words first. So the word itself is professional etiquettes and code of conduct. Now, it's a simple English word. Etiquettes means the way you conduct yourself, the mannerism, the behavior, or the way you professionally portray yourself and your profession in front of the patient. Okay, so I realized this is really important because when I first came to Australia in early 2018, obviously I had experience of 10 years back home in India. But I immediately realized in my first month of work here that my Indian skills are not going to take me too far if I want to survive or compete in the market here, because there was certainly a difference in the way my colleagues used to talk to the patients, and there was a bit of a difference in the way I used to talk, because yeah, one might say it's maybe the accent of talking, but I would say it's not more than accent, it's more the etiquettes which we have, like the way we present ourselves. I won't say the Indian system is bad. In fact, I would say that Indian education is the best education one can have. So if you're doing masters in India and then trying to go abroad, you are in a better shape, I must say, rather than being a graduate and directly going abroad, because you are getting your hands-on clinical experience in those 2 years on so many different kinds of patients, which you might not come across in an international setup. That's the way I look at it. The disadvantage of the Indian setup is there's so much to do that we don't concentrate on the quality sometimes, and the quality is compromised because we have a certain number of patients to be addressed in a certain time. So, it gets a bit tricky. You can't do the normal etiquettes of the clinical assessment, like taking a proper consent, asking the consent every time. So like what we say here, you normally take a consent at least twice or thrice during a assessment and a treatment session. So you first take a consent during the subjective assessment. You take a consent later on objective assessment when you try to touch the patient. We are supposed to take another consent. And third, when you're actually doing the treatment or the management part, that time you again take a consent that if you're finding any sort of a dizziness, or you're feeling a bit wobbly on your feet, or you're having a bit of pain, or you're feeling fatigued if it's a cardiorespiratory patient, then we again take a consent. Are you okay to go ahead? So that's 3 times during a 50 or 40-minute session. In India, we perhaps would not do it in a month. 3 times consent with a patient. So yeah, meaning obviously there's what I can say, good and bad side to everything. I would never like to compare, because my education has been entirely in India. In fact, I worked in India, and I think India has given the best of the etiquettes which I want in myself. So let's get this started, and I would like it to be more interaction rather than me just speaking. So what are the contents here? The contents will be, obviously we'll give an introduction of what etiquettes is and what the code of conduct is. What is good care? So we normally say like, I want to be a good physio. That's the common goal which all of us have. So being a good physio doesn't mean like getting 80% marks in all 4 years and getting a gold medal during your to that. And that's the reason we would normally say it's not necessary that a good academician can be a good clinician, and vice versa. A good clinician can be a good academician. They both require completely different sort of skills, and even it applies when it comes to care. So it does not mean that if you are a good curriculum, it does not mean that you will be a good clinical practitioner, because you just your knowledge when you're dealing with a patient. Next, the patients or clients, you have some sort of a relationship with them. And it's also important to have a relationship with your interdisciplinary team. So it may include your other physios, it might include the occupational therapist, the speech, your neurologist, your general medicine doctor, your orthopedic surgeon. So you have to have a sort of a when we talk to a patient, but there's obviously a few sort of words which have to be played. Like example which I gave was consent, which is really important. Another one which I would normally give is goal setting. So when I was working in India, I never thought goal setting is so important, but here suddenly when I come in the last 4 years, goal setting is the most important part of your assessment. So what your patient actually wants to achieve from you, or what the patient wants to achieve from the session, that's really important. Okay, so I'll give a common example is, if you have say a Parkinson's patient, so 2 different Parkinson's patients might have a completely different short-term goals and long-term goals. So one might say, it's okay, I might not go in the community, I just want to be safe at home. So that's his goal, that he just wants to be at home. He doesn't want to achieve the high level function of community, suppose. Okay. There might be another Parkinson patient who might say that I want to get back to, say, professional sports, which he was playing before he got the Parkinson's. So that requires a completely different approach in terms of your treatment management or your goal setting. So you can't compare. You obviously have to give the, what I can say, the importance to what the patient wants from you. And also what I would say is, besides that, you have to take into account what the patient's social or, the personal setup in his house is, like how well supported he is, how much, other stresses he has in his mental space. Okay, so this is where the ICF comes into the picture, and ICF is really, really highlighted here, or in most parts of Europe or US also. Like, obviously we do have it in MHS, and we do emphasize a lot on ICF, right, from a third year, fourth year, and even in MPT. So basically, your ICF model will decide what you want to design your assessment and your treatment plan with the session. Okay, so these are the contents here which I would like to briefly sort of talk about before I get into the actual, what I should say, the etiquettes or the code of conduct. Now, before we go into conduct, what do we all do? We all of us treat patients. And when we talk about treating a patient, we basically are giving care. Okay. So we are trying to take care of their pain. We are trying to take care of their reduced balance. We are trying to take care of their reduced chest expansion, you can say. We're trying to take care of their reduced participation in the community. So what is care? So care is basically you're trying to deliver some sort of a physical or mental sort of support to a patient, and trying to get him to the highest functional level. Okay. So when you're talking about care, it can be in terms of what I can say, in terms of treatment, or it can also be in terms of the practice, what you want to do. So practice means any role where you will involve your skills and knowledge as a practitioner in that regulated profession. So you basically want to deliver what you know the best to your patient so that he or she is on the path to recovery. Okay. So before we get into that, what is the code and what are the uses of a code? So we normally have a registration number everywhere. So we have a IAP registration number. We have a Maharashtra State OTPT registration number in India. We also have similar registration numbers across Europe or US or Australia, that you have a certain number which you call as, in Australia, we call it as the HPR registration number. Now, the only difference there and the difference here is that once you get a membership at a certain India, you get a lifetime membership. Whereas when you get a registration anywhere abroad, only for 1 year. Okay, so you get it for 1 year, and then you are evaluated at every 1 year. You have to renew that registration. And when they actually consider renewal, there's a lot of things which come into picture. It basically takes into account what your professional conduct was during that 1 year. How well do you treat your patients? What is the patient feedback? That is also sometimes taken into account, because the employers, if you're not the employer and you're working with someone, the employer supervisors taken into what development hours. Okay, so in India, we don't actually see that. Once you get an IP registration or an OTP, you get it for your all life. So no matter even if you don't study later after your master's or your bachelor's, you are safe. You still have a registration. You can practice what you want to practice, and no one is going to question you that what did you actually achieve in the last 2 years or last 1 year besides treating, say, 2,000 patients. What did you achieve? Did you attend any courses, workshops? Did you go, like, any webinars, or did you try to upgrade your knowledge? Whereas here, it is really important that we upgrade our knowledge and stay in touch with the recent advances. So it can be in terms of, say, online things which are going on. The last 1.5 years been all online. It's like face-to-face is hardly happening, or it's really less, or it can be your face-to-face workshops. Okay, so basically the code will involve the setting up of the practitioner, so that we make sure the practitioner is in the right space to deliver the best care to the patient. Okay, so as a physio, what are the qualities you need to have? If anyone wants to speak up, I just want it to be anyone could volunteer and turn on their mic and say, as a physio, what you want to actually achieve, whether you're a UG or a PG. What are your goals to, when you want to practice as a physio? Obviously, I can read the entire presentation. It is more than 60 slides, which I'm not going to do because all of you will fall asleep. So before we get into the etiquettes, like, let me hear from one of you, like, what is your understanding? What do you want to achieve as a physio? Obviously, some of the points are mentioned there, so I would appreciate if you don't read them.
I think I would like to be confident enough to take my patients into my confidence that they will be treated in a perfect.
Okay, that's a direct first statement given by, I don't know, sorry, your name, but I would say that's a rapport. So the most important thing is the rapport, which you mentions. So once you develop a rapport with the patient, it will basically develop the confidence of the patient in you that I'm in safe hands. So the patient will be more compliant with your treatment. Okay, so what she said is you should develop that rapport so that the patient participates in your treatment session with more enthusiasm and the feeling of safety that with this physio, I'm safe. Okay, that's one really important good point. Any other point there, if anyone wants to mention? You can obviously see the slides in front of you. You can read it, but put it in a more different way.
Improving their functional improvements, like functional efficiency.
Yes, that's right. So basically, you mean to say you want to have some outcome measure, right? You want to see some different, something different, like, what he's say, if the patient is coming to you with elbow range of motion, say 10 degree to 70 degree, you want to try and improve it, say, to 5 degree to 75 degrees. You want to improve the extension. And if there's a flexion also deficit, you want to improve that. So yeah, that's perfectly fine. Anything else in terms of ethics now? Like, let's not get into treatment because this is not a clinical session. It's more like an ethical session. You have the points in front of you. Just put it in a different experience. You go to clinics every day, so you know what you actually trying to achieve.
As a physio, I would like to remove the stigma. Like, people normally in India believe that physiotherapy is all about massage and all, and most people aren't aware like what physiotherapy actually is. So I would like to change that.
That's good. So basically, you want to improve the society's acceptance of the profession. This is another good point. Yeah, that's a good point. Anyone else before we move to the next slide? Any important point? Come on, it's an ethical point. Nothing in terms of treatment. Okay, I'll go ahead with that. Okay, so basically what you want to do is you want to first make sure safety. Okay, so your session should be safe. And when you talk about safety, safety is to be from two parts. Okay, safety is not only of the patient, safety is also from your point of view. Now, many a times what happens when you treat patients, you are putting yourself in a dangerous position. So maybe you're squatting, you're trying to push, pull, something which is not safe for your own back or your own shoulder or neck, which you don't realize now. But maybe if you practice the same profession over the next 15, 20 years, then you suddenly realize that all the hard work which you have done in awkward positions, what we say ergonomics, that is going to affect you. So basically you should be safe for the patient and you should be safe for yourself. And the last part, which we all want to do, is we want to practice a profession with actual integrity, be truthful to the profession, and be compassionate about it. So basically, you should have the will that you want to do it. If you're just doing it for the sake of, going for a 9-to-5 job, then you won't be able to carry it on for a long time. Then it's better you start looking at alternatives. So when you talk about alternatives, I don't mean to say you leave the profession. You can do something in physio, but there's different ways you can look at it. Okay. So I don't want to get into that part because that's not the agenda of the session. I'll go ahead in terms of the ethical part. So what is good care? So basically you need to assess the client. You need to formulate what the patient goals are or what is the patient's problem. You need to make sure that the patient has enough care at home. So it should be enough support. So whether he's married, unmarried, or whether the limitations of the both the patient and the physio, because as a physio it's really important for us to recognize that we have some limitations ourselves, which very few of us actually ready to accept, which is a bit sad that we feel that no, if I have some sort of a patient coming to me, no matter if I'm not the expert in that, I will still want to do it. Whereas the ideal situation there is, I'll give an example, is I'm a musculoskeletal physio. And before I came to Australia, if somebody gave me a stroke patient, I would hesitate to say a stroke patient, because the last stroke patient which I saw was during my internship, which was in 2005. And in 2018, anyone told you can have a stroke patient, treat, you want to take it, I would really hesitate to say yes. I would say rather, I would love to see the patient. I don't want to deny it, but I think I can refer him to one of my colleagues who is a neurophysio, and he or she will be the right person for that patient. So that etiquette has to be there, that you got to accept that it's not your domain, because physio is such a wide field. You can't be an expert in everything. So you might be a MSK, you might be a neuro, you might be a cardiovascular physio. So try to accept your shortcomings. Okay, don't try and what I can say, get into each domain. Like develop your professionals won't develop unless and until you get into that patient. So at that level, you should accept it. Obviously, that might be in presence of your senior, it might be in presence of your masters, it might be in presence of your clinical staff, it might be in presence of your academic staff or sir. So when you're seeing that, that's when you got to learn. Okay, so accept it when you take it as a learning point of view. And once you're finished learning, try and accept that, no, it's not the right thing for me to see it. I will refer him. So example, two of you are best friends and practicing the same area. Try to refer the patients to each other. So I'll be coming to that point also. Referencing is really important. Okay, that's where you will actually develop a sort of a social network. And believe me, physiotherapy is a field where social networking is really required. Okay, it's not only in terms of clinical practice in general, because our field is the field where we spend maximum time with the patient communicating. So, if you don't communicate well with the patient or with your fellow colleagues, or you don't have a good rapport with them, it's going to affect you. So obviously try and respect each other's clinical decision making. If you don't agree, don't get into fights with them. Say that this is your opinion, but my patient is not wrong. This for me. Okay. So going ahead, so good care. I'm really not digging in each and every line. There's a lot of content input, and obviously before I go ahead, I apologize. This is one of PowerPoint presentation. I'll accept this a few people because I really don't want to read each line and bore off everyone. So basically, good care should be able to address your patient shortcomings, should be able to plan a proper systematic treatment, and you should be having an outcome measure. Okay, so if you're an MPT now or you're a postgraduate student listening to me, you will understand these things better than say an intern or a third year or fourth year who might not understand the outcome measure to the best of the possible extent. Obviously you will with the third year. You do a lot of special tests in ortho and assessment scales in your neuro and cardio SP, 6-minute walk test, your MAS and your TARDI and all. But obviously as a postgraduate, you understand these things much better. So taking an outcome measure is also a skill. And here in Australia, it's really important for us because every session we have to take an outcome measure. Maybe in India, we don't. We take it maybe after a week. But here in Australia, it's really important that every session, at the end of the session, you're going to take an outcome measure. So I cannot take an outcome measure, say like a Oswestry disability scale. I cannot take that. Or I cannot take an outcome measure, say like KOOS for the knee, because that will take literally some time for me to actually get an outcome measure. Or I cannot take a modified Ashworth scale every time for a neuro patient. I cannot take a 6-minute walk test patient. So how do an outcome, ethically and also in terms of time? It can be a simple outcome measure. It can be, say, patient satisfaction. It can be a simple outcome measure, say, in terms of your VAS. So you just ask like 0, no pain, 10, worst pain, how much is your pain? Or what you can say, neuro, what we normally tend to do is the functional scale. Like you can take a part of the MAS scale, say sit to stand, how well the patient is doing sit to stand. That is an outcome measure. You need not do anything hi-fi. Stand, also good outcome measure. So basically, I don't want to read the slides, but good direction in where the but it's really important. Okay, thank you for that. It's very important for us to make sure that you're taking a good care into account and making sure that the patient goals are addressed. So when you have a decision to access to, you basically mean to say that you have access to a good care. So it can be a private setup or it can be a hospital setup. You have a good access to a MDT, what we call as the multidisciplinary team. So it might be, say, your orthopedic surgeons or other medical professionals, and you should have proper access to the setup. So in terms of space or in terms of equipment. So all these things are going to affect what sort of care you're going to give to the patient. And even if you don't have the best setup, or even if you don't have a very well-renowned multidisciplinary team, it does not mean that your session is going to be less effective. Okay, it basically comes to you how effectively you carry your session. And it is obviously important that you have a good setup or a good referencing, but you are the one who decides what your care is going to look like. So it's more your responsibility, as per me. Now, at this point, one of the students who about that, what is the relationship between a patient and or with a patient or a client? Obviously, you should have some amount of a courtesy. That is most important. So, it's not like we speak with sort of a flawed language, I'll say. But there's a difference. What I'll say is where in many of the Indian setups, we decide the treatment, and we tell the patient, this is the treatment, I'm going to do this for you. Whereas many of the overseas countries, it's exactly the opposite. Patient decides, like, this is what I would like to do, and I would like you to do, from that session. Normally do as a physio is I take a assessment and I tell the patient this is the problem, and I can deliver you treatment A, B, or C. How do you feel about that? Then the patient says, for example, if it's a low back pain patient, or you can say a tendinopathy patient, and I say, okay, what I can do is I can give you a functional treatment in terms of exercises, maybe say a Nordics exercise for hamstring if it's a gluteal tendinopathy, or I can say I can do some amount of taping, say a rigid taping or a kinesiotaping, taping, or I just learn dry needling. I will do a dry needling. If it's not a proper, what I'll say, ethical setup, I will do all the three on the patient to show my skills, that I have dry needling certification, I have a taping certification, and I'm ACSM certified sports therapist. So I will deliver it. Whereas in an overseas setup, you are supposed to get the consent of the patient saying that, okay, I can do this. What would you like to do? And then the patient tells to me that I fear needles. I don't like needles. So can you avoid the needles? So he will tell you, no, I don't want dry needling. I don't want cupping. My skin is sensitive. Here, there are a lot of skin issues anyways, because we have less ozone here. So then the patient might say, I might not also be, well equipped with taping. So can you just give me a functional treatment? And then I say, yes, okay, we'll do a functional treatment. So here the patient decides what is right for him. Whereas in many other setups in the different parts of the world, we decide that, okay, this is my skill. Let me try that. So it depends upon you why and how you want to keep the session going. What you all are doing here, all of us who have spoken on this platform so far, we're trying to be loud, we're trying to be clear. I tend to speak, so normally I am trying to get my pace down and talk slowly. Obviously, my accent is very much Indian now. I've not developed an Australian accent so far, which is good. I'm talking. This is really important because what I normally say in options which I conducted my ex-students when I used to take lectures, in the first 5 minutes when you see a patient, okay, you might not make the patient for your clinical practice forever. That is, the patient might not become yours forever. But in the first 5 minutes, you can make sure that the patient will never come back to you. Okay, and that the way the patient's history out properly, then the patients are very smart. They realize that there's a problem there, that this person is not asking me logical questions. So you might not get a patient in the first 5 or 10 minutes as your patient for the rest of your month or year, but you will definitely lose your patient if you don't start. As I will say is, I have an example of used with due respect. When I used to actually teach them, 15 years back, to be not only me at college, person going to achieve in life, they don't have any knowledge about the basics anatomy or physiology or whatever. Whereas those people are one of the who are doing the most communication important. Really important is confidentiality and privacy, which can be best illustrated in our profession, because this is more a female profession where you have around say 90% females, and sometimes for physio to address say a low back pain patient who is a female, because a female patient might not be comfortable with the male therapist sometimes. So this happens a lot in the Eastern countries, say like Middle East, like say your UAE, Qatar, and Saudi Arabia, and there where the ladies are usually used to wear the burqa, and ethical things there get to a different level, that the male person sometimes are not seeing female patients, or they take the female patient with some sort of a documentation that the female patient says that okay, so and so area has to be addressed. Or sometimes it happens the care happens in front of a third person, can be a partner, the husband maybe, or the third person can be a friend. So these things like privacy are not that well this thing in India, but it can be started, and I'm sure many of the setups have done that. It applies both. It applies male physio, a female patient seeing a male patient, because you never know when patients can turn back and hit upon you. Okay, so it's like when you're seeing a patient, you should be making sure if it's opposite sex, you should be having a proper atmosphere. The screening should be proper. Patient's confidentiality of the exposure of the body part has to be taken care, and your safety is important. You don't want to be in an awkward situation tomorrow. It's a social media generation. Things spread really fast. You might be a very good physical therapist, but if you don't address the principle of privacy or confidentiality properly, this obviously read the points. I would also share the documentation which is coming from here, Australia. So it's basically the guidelines the same all over the world. It's not that Europe is different or US is different or India is different. It's the same. It's only the way we put it. Okay. Then is being safe and having a sensitive practice. So I have been saying the safety is important. You have to be safe in your session. You have to make sure that you are addressing the patient as a whole, taking into account the patient's social, economic, cultural, and behavioral factors, the patient's background, the patient's social setup back home, whether he or she is depressed, whether he or she is having other stresses in life, whether there's a job security issue, whether there's a financial security issue. Because if a patient is not having a sort of a psychological, what I can say, well-to-do, it's going to affect his recovery. So, like example, we say, what is pain? Pain, or what does WHO define? It says that it has different components. It has a physical component, it has a psychosocial component, it has a psychological component, it has a social component. So these things have to be addressed, or else just seeing a part like range of motion, or say your spasticity or your chest expansion is not going to take you anywhere. Okay? You have to be making sure you are addressing the patient as a whole. And one simple phrase which I normally put is, you have to treat the patient, you don't treat the condition. What happens is many times we are so much in a sort of a computer triggered mode that once a patient is sent to you, so you are sitting in a clinic and a patient comes to you with say osteoarthritis knee, you expect the same presentation, that this is going to be the patient, it's going to be a elderly obese lady having varus in the knees, having some sort of extension lag, is going to have fixed flexion deformity, so on. You start expecting things and you already design a treatment before you see the patient, that I'm going to do this treatment, which is wrong. What you should ideally do is see the patient, and when you see the patient might be completely different. The patient might not be an elderly lady. The patient might not have varus in her knees. The patient might not have a fixed flexion deformity. The patient might not even have pain. So what are you going to treat then? It's going to be completely different. So the safe and sensitive practice is making sure you see the patient and not the condition, and you try to treat the patient for what the patient tells you. So if the patient says, I'm not able to climb stairs, So your treatment should basically try and make sure you're making the patient to climb stairs. So what do you want to climb stair? You want to have a proper gait. When you want to have proper gait, you would perhaps work more on the quadriceps, because the patient is not able to have a proper transition to the mid stance. So you should be addressing the quadriceps drills in that session more. The patient might not be having pain, so there's no point doing treatment which is going to talk about the pain. Okay. Going ahead, you have to involve the patient's family in the treatment. You have to involve the patient's partner. You have to involve the patient's carers. Okay, now carer is a concept which is not much popular in India, because we have a very good social networking in India. Like you might have joint families, or you still live in nuclear families, but there's a lot of care available at home. Whereas in countries like in Europe or US and Australia, people are in isolation. People live in, they live by themselves, hundreds of kilometers away from the partners, sometimes because of job or maybe because of the social stigma or something like that. So for them, we have what we call as the social carers. These are appointed by this is a sort of a care which comes with the government, sort of a package for health. So you should have the rapport with the carer as well, because the carer knows the condition of the patient the best, or the partner knows the condition of the patient the best. So you should have that rapport with the family as well. Okay. Next, we come to addressing some adverse events and having disclosures. So disclosure will be basically trying and making sure you have something documented or something told to the patient, saying that suppose I'm addressing a neuro patient, I will say, like, I'm going to conduct a neurological assessment and going to give you some exercises in a functional position. Anytime you feel you're feeling unstable, or you feel you're threatened that you might fall or lose your balance, can you please tell me? Now, this is not a consent. This is a disclosure to the patient that if you're not feeling well in between the session, please tell me that, so that I can adequately, treat that, or maybe address it, maybe give you some amount of rest. So if it's a cardiovascular patient, you might say, like, anytime you feel short of breath, or you feel a decreased endurance, or you feel a bit fatigued, tell me so that I can give you a rest period. Okay, so these disclosures have to be done during the session. Sometimes you don't give importance to them, but you have to make sure that the patient is safe and the patient is able to have a rest period in between. Okay. So you need to notify the patient that what his complaint is, whether you're going to be able to resolve it, so what sort of a prompt you're going to give them, any notification, and you have to comply them with the policies of that place. So every state has a different policy. So I'm not talking about, say, Maharashtra has a different policies compared to Karnataka. We have very much have the same policies, but here New South Wales has a very different policy. Say, for example, Victoria. So Melbourne follows something else, Sydney follows something else. So we have different policies in terms of states also. So here we take care that we address it as per the state we are working in. Whereas in India, it's more uniform, like you are free to do what you feel best for the patient. Now, end of life care, this is more like, because I'm working in a geriatric setup, so I'm working more, my interest has shifted from musculoskeletal to more a geriatric or neurological neuro rehab, because I'm loving neuro rehab at the minute. So end of life care is important because many of my clients are, say, in the late 80s or 90s, because Australia is an aging nation. Canada is also an aging nation. So when you move or migrate to Australia or Canada, you'll suddenly realize that the age of the patients which you see is more on the higher side, not the lower side. It's more the aging population. The basic population ratios here are more towards the 50, 60, 70. Whereas in India is a young nation. India has more the 20s and the 30s. So there's a big difference there, because ours is more the working population, whereas here it's more the, what you can say, the population which requires the care, hence the demand for our profession for overseas, because the population here requires young people like us to look after them. Okay. Personal relationship is one thing which I really wanted to enlighten or talk about, and I would like to have an understanding from students. How do you maintain your personal relationship with the patient? So example, you are in a clinical setup, you are in a private hospital, the patient who comes to you is, say, a 28-year-old male, maybe he's a model or maybe he's an actor, he's having low back pain. How professionally will you conduct it, making sure patient is safe, treatment is addressed, and your relationship with the patient during the treatment session and after the treatment session? If anyone wants to speak up, because you must have had experiences, and we have to be blunt and straightforward about this, even on a platform like a webinar. Like, there must be some good experiences. They might have been an awkward experiences. I don't want to hear the awkward experiences. But obviously, as an ethical practice, anyone wants to share any experience and speak up, like in the clinical situation I have given. It can be the vice versa as well. Okay, it can be a male physio and you're seeing a opposite gender patient, because this is where the actually ethics comes into picture. So what is your relationship with the patient? Anyone wants to speak any sort of experience? In short, good or bad? I would prefer to hear the good and not the bad, because there are 100 people listening. No experience, or maybe all experiences were really good. Okay, I'll go ahead with that. Okay, so basically what we say is, if you are addressing a patient as say a patient's elderly patient with a young son or a opposite gender daughter, then you should not be directly communicating with the patient for whatever reason, unless the patient has, say, a speech issue or a hearing issue. So it is really important that the professional boundaries are set up. Also, the second thing is you're not allowed to communicate with them on any social platform. So in terms of social platform, suppose I'm seeing a patient who is a 60-year-old lady, and she lives with a daughter who's 21 years old. And I'm seeing the 60-year-old lady, and tomorrow that 20-year-old daughter sends me a request on Facebook. I am not supposed to accept it. Simple as that. If I accept it, and say, God forbid, after a month, the daughter puts some allegations, I'll be in trouble. This is the legislation here. So during the treatment session, you're not supposed to have any sort of a personal relationship with any of the patient's family, especially in sort of a tricky situation. Whereas after the treatment session gets over, so example, the patient is discharged, then you have the liability to perhaps communicate, interact with whoever you want. Then you're free about that. Second things, common example which I give is, I'm a sports physio. I work with a football team here, say a footy team, which we call as Australian. In Australia, football is not football; it is rugby, because rugby is the main sport here. So they don't play in English soccer. They play the footy here, which we call as the rugby, which is a big game here. If I am a sports physio, then after the season, the team wins, and the team calls me for a drinks party on a Saturday evening. If the drinks party is at the end of a season, I'm allowed to attend it. Whereas if the party is during a season, as a physio, I'm not allowed to go for it. Professionally, I'm not allowed to attend anything which is coming in between a curriculum of a session. So I hope I can just make it short, is if you are in between a treatment session in terms of rehab, you are professionally not supposed to get involved with any sort of a thing. Whereas if it's before or after a session, you can professionally, your professional boundaries are more free. Okay. Working with other practitioners and professionals is really important, and I think it's more important in India because we have so much competition, like in terms of your social networking with your medical professionals, that you have to have a good rapport with your orthopedic surgeons and your neurologists, and you also have need a good rapport with your occupational therapist or speech therapist, because our patients are more interrelated. So example, if you're a pediatric physiotherapist or if you're an adult neurophysiotherapist, you need a good rapport with your speech therapist and your OT, because there'll be many situations where you have to work as a multidisciplinary team. So if you need to have some sort of not collaboration, I will say, like a social, professional relationship with the occupational therapist or speech therapist, so that you're able to address the patient. Okay. Whereas, say example, like a MSK person, I might need to have a lot of interaction with, say, an orthotist, because my patients might be RA or OA. I might require a lot of splints. I might require a lot of braces. I might require a lot of orthosis or prosthesis. I need to have a good rapport with the orthotist or a prosthetic. So this multidisciplinary team approach is really, really important when it comes to ethics. Delegation, referral, and handover. So before I speak, I would like to hear anyone speak maybe for a couple of minutes or 1 minute and tell me what is your understanding of this slide. Because I think I'm speaking too much and I'm just wondering whether everyone is awake or gone asleep. So if anyone wants to speak, what is your understanding of this slide? It's there, the points are there. If you want to read, you can read it. What is delegation, what is referral, and what is handover? It's a very boring point to talk about at 3:30 in the afternoon. But if anyone wants to go ahead, please. Or even if the faculty wants to go, please It's a very simple, just there on the slide. What is delegation, referral, and handover? I hope everyone is there. I'm not checking my screen because I'm having my presentation online. I have no idea how many people are online at the minute.
Good afternoon, sir.
Yeah, good to hear.
So I wanted to ask about referral. So in India, it is like directly they put on the notes that you have to refer so and so doctor. So is it the same in abroad, like, or do we have a proper procedure for it, or is it
Well, I
ethical
think
to put
you're. No, I mean, firstly, I would say things in India are getting better.
Yes, yes.
What I hear from my friends and all, things in India are getting better, because if you talk about a few decades back in India, it was obviously thought that physios can only treat patients who are referred by orthopedic surgeons or by neurologists. This was many years back. But now things are getting better, that people are more aware of the profession, that patients are directly coming to us. For example, say if you're a sports physio now, you are in a very lucrative career, because there's so many options in different leagues across in cricket or say Olympics, which there's a team of physios which went there. 3 of the physios, they were my ex-students who went there, and they shared their experience of Tokyo with me after they came back. It is like I'm like, okay, this is so much lucrative in terms of the way the lifestyle you have. So I would not say that referencing is strictly a thing like physios cannot see a patient directly. Physios can see a patient directly. The thing what I would say in referencing is, do not try and comment into sections which are not in your domain. So tomorrow if your patient asks you that, okay, these exercises are good, but I develop pain, please don't prescribe any medication there. That time you have to give a reference that go and see a doctor. He will tell you what to do. I am not, even if I've studied pharmacy in my second year, I'm not supposed to prescribe as a physio. So your referencing there becomes important. Okay, I hope I have addressed to what you're talking. It's same in abroad also, that I cannot actually see a thing which is not my domain. So example, if the patient is asking me tomorrow to give her a splint, or if the referral from the GP is coming, give a splint, I'm not equipped to give a splint. I know, obviously I did my 4th year bioengineering, in which we had splints we made to get the grades and pass the college level exam, but I'm not equipped to make a splint. So I should be giving a referral to a orthotist here to make a splint for my patient. So, yes. Was that a question?
Yes, thank you, sir. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, that's good. Thank you. What is handover? Anyone wants to talk? When does handover come into picture? What is the clinical situation you feel handover comes into picture? It's written there. This is one sentence. Handover is the process of transferring all responsibility to another practitioner. And अपने सिर से लो और दूसरे के सिर पे डालो. So how do you do it? And when do you do it? You must have done handovers when you change postings, right? In internship. If you're moving from 1 month to another month, you're changing your posting. So you do a handover, right, to the next batch. That this is a patient I was seeing, and now you'll be seeing that patient from the 1st of October. So basically, handover means you address, you basically give a sort of a summary of what you're doing with the patient, and you give it to the person who's going to see next. Secondly, handover can also mean is when you are leaving a practice. So if you're resigning from a job somewhere, you're supposed to give a handover of an entire clinical load to the next person who's coming in your place. That is really important. It has to be both verbal and it has to be in physical, or a sort of a soft copy and hard copy both. That is really important here. So when you're leaving one job and moving to another job, handover is really important. It has to be a proper communication. Also, the second thing which we try to make sure is you also leave your contact number always there. So tomorrow, if the next person who is coming there wants to ask you some doubt, professionally you should be answerable. You cannot say ki abhi I'm not a part of the setup now, abhi main nahi batane wala. That is not professionalism here. And directly, indirectly, these things make a lot of difference in your practice. In India, I don't know whether it makes a difference. It might, because obviously the next physio won't be happy that I had tried to get some information and that person was a bit of egoistic and didn't tell me what a proper handover. But professionally, you don't land into trouble. Whereas overseas, professionally, you'll be into trouble. If somebody asks you later also after resigning, what was the treatment or rehab, can you just briefly elaborate? You are supposed to give some sort of obviously it has to be professional. It can't be on the phone or in the fish market. It has to be somewhere in a proper tele rehab or a proper documented way, which has to be done. Okay. So handover is really, really important. Delegation is also important, and I
So
think
what's
this is
the
the best.
difference?
Yeah, I come back. Yes.
What's the difference between delegation and handover?
Yeah, we all of us are best in delegation. Indians. I'll tell you the common example. We learn to delegate work from a second year when in physiotherapy. We learn to delegate our juniors what to do for us. If there's a first year student, we know how to delegate some work of ours to them. That is delegation. When you go to third year, you try to take your second year to tell them to give a bit of stretching for your patient. That is delegation. When you go to fourth year, you make your third year junior to do special test or do assessment. That is delegation. When you become an intern, you ask your fourth year to give the treatment. That is delegation. You're trying to delegate the work. Whereas referral is a complete professional handover. Which I said, example, internship, when you're moving from one posting to the other, when you are actually giving up the patient completely, that becomes a reference. Whereas delegation is some sort of a skill set, a domain, which you're just asking some person, okay, hamstring stretching kara le iska. That is a delegation that you're trying to, okay? Or perhaps enter the patient's notes in the file. That is a delegation, okay? Is that a bit clear?
Yes,
A bit
sir.
clear?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, okay. All right, I'll try and rush through because the PowerPoint will not end, and I think I'm almost nearing the end. This thing I would not want to carry on a lot. I'll just rush through the points. So yeah, I mean, in good practice, you should have a good delegation, referral, or a handover. Teamwork is really important, and teamwork is important when you're studying. Teamwork is important when you step into your professional life as well, that you have to maintain contact with each other, especially when you are an orthophysio, cardiophysio, and a neurophysio who are best friends during your professional life. It's always good to maintain a professional relationship as well, because you might be able to cross-refer patients between you, and the entire team grows together. Okay, so example, I'll give a common example is I have developed this personal platform which is called as PhysioEd. So I have a team of people who are, some are bachelors, some are masters. So if I want my platform to grow at PhysioEd, how can I make it grow? It's not that I will go into every webinar or I will conduct every Instagram live session which I do. That's not going to make my platform grow, because that's, if I fall sick tomorrow, there's no one else to do that job. So I have to make sure there is a team of 5 or 10 people ready, that if tomorrow something happens to me, I can safely say that person X, can you do this webinar with this platform, say tomorrow, because I'm not well. So teamwork is really important. You have to have belief, and you have to have that sort of a bonding with someone, that you make that person professionally and personally grow as well. Otherwise your team won't grow. One person cannot run a team. Okay. Coordinating care with other practitioners, this is like what I said like before, it's like more like an interdisciplinary team approach. Okay, I'm not reading the points there. There's a lot of points, a lot of slides. Using of healthcare resources. If I just go to the points here, you basically try and make sure that you're upholding the rights of the patients. You're taking the level to a safest extent, and you're making sure that it's done in a sort of a proper healthcare setup. So basically what you mean to say is you try to give the best of the resources available to the patient so that the patient benefits from that. Health advocacy. Now, whether it's an Australian setup or an Indian setup, there's a different sort of challenge. So in India also, when you go into a community setup, which some of you are masters in community physio now here, so you must be knowing that when you go to the village setup, there's a lot of difference in terms of as a physio what you can do, because there's nothing there. You might be going for a camp for 2 days and you see there's no equipment there for you to actually do. So what are you actually going to address the patient with? So you have to make sure you give some basic exercises. It might be nothing high-fi, like say gym ball or say TheraBand, or something like mobilizations and stuff. It can be a simple exercise like avoiding squatting positions, or giving proper techniques of lifting a can of water, or perhaps proper ways to drive a bullock cart, suppose. Even that, this all will make a lot of difference. That's why community physio is so much what I can say, need a branch as compared to MSK, cardiorespy, and neuro, with due respect to them. That a lot of Indian setup has two extremes. Either you have a village or you have the hi-fi industrial setup. And when you talk of physio is either going to blossom completely in ergonomics, which is the industrial setup, or physio is going to develop more in the villages, because if you go in villages, there's actual need for physios. We heard a lot of this stuff. The profession is saturated. There are no jobs. There's so much of scarcity of jobs, there's so much competition. Go and sit in some village and practice. You will get a lot of patients. So like, why do you want to stick in Mumbai or Pune? Go somewhere outside, go in a village. I know it's not the lifestyle you want to do, but if you want to actually experience your professional growth, work in some regional area for 6 months also, you will see a lot of change in your attitude or your way of approaching patients. Public health is a word which we use here in Australia. In India, we might say the rural health, like, or the government health. Okay, so anything which is free, like, public health system. So in Australia, we have a public health and you have a private health, and private health is really expensive, really, really expensive. No one can afford it. Whereas public health, there's a lot of waiting, which is covered by the Australian government. Like, just like how we have in India, if you go to a civil hospital, it will be free. But will you want to get treated in a civil hospital? You will say, no, I want to get treated in a branded hospital. So that will cost you a lot of money. So you have to make sure you can discriminate between a public and a private setup. Now, this is the last point, and I think Dr. Preeti will agree, because it's around just the time, it's 4 o'clock there, and I would not want to rush. The PowerPoint doesn't get over, it's all right. I will say minimizing risk and having a risk management model. Okay, this is important because whether you're doing an assessment or you're doing a treatment session, it is important to identify what are the risk factors for your patient, and you try and address the risk factors more rather than addressing only the patient's care. So what happens, we only want to achieve a good outcome, but we don't sometimes take into account the faulty things which are there. So it can be, say, house setup, or it can be, say, orthotics, or it can be, say, a walking aid, a simple thing like a walking aid. Many of times, even as orthophysios, we pay so much attention to the patient that we don't address, say, height of a stick, height of a four-wheel frame. Do we always check it when patients come to us? Not necessary. We are so much interested in seeing that TKR or THR or ACL, that sometimes we don't actually do the simple things. Like, do we measure the crutch? Do we measure the four-wheel frame all the time? Or when it's a pediatric patient, do we make sure that the walker is at the same height or the proper level? Are you always checking to the orthotics, like say your AFO? Are they getting tight? Is the child developing some sort of a skin, sort of a rash or allergy because the splint is getting tight? No, we might not look into it. But as per the risk management model, it is not only important for us to see the patient or the treatment, make sure you address the risk first. Because you might, it's always better to say, I might not give a positive thing to my patient, but at least I make sure the patient does not suffer anything negative. Even if you're able to achieve that, you have done a good job, or decent job, I'll say, not a good job, decent job. Whereas if you try to achieve something extraordinary by saying, I did a dry needling course 1 month back, and I'm saying this because in India there's been such a spurt of workshops. Everyone wants to do some sort of a workshop and wants to implement that right away. Sometimes it's not right for that patient, and you don't take care of the basic things like safety of the patient, or you might not take care of the basic skin conditions. So if the patient is having allergic skin or having some psoriasis or any other dermatological condition, he or she does not require, is not suited for taping. So you thinking about doing taping is a wrong idea. So the risk model says that first you make sure you don't harm the patient. When you do that, then you see how you make the patient benefit. Okay, so that's the same point. It's been put in different points here. I really don't want to run through these points. This is more like these 2 slides are really poor. I would like to delete them from my presentation. They are embarrassing because there's so much content. Okay, so professional behavior, I think we all talked about it. I'm just trying to rush through because I just don't want to just read the slides. It's professional boundaries, reporting obligation. Yes, I'll just mention this point. If there's something which happens to a patient, I have a duty of care, we say, that I have to report it to the doctor or to the nurse. So if I'm working in a geriatric setup, and even if the thing is not related to my profession, so example, in the hospital or in the geriatric setup, a male patient was trying to misbehave with a female patient, I have a duty of care to report it to the nurse or to the hospital management that so and so thing is happening. I cannot say that, what do I do? It's not my this thing. The lady will see it. The lady's family will see it. No. If there's something you see in your setup which you work, you're supposed to take it in the hierarchy. Don't jump to the management straight away. So example, if I'm a student, I will tell it to my senior. Or if I'm the physio, I'll tell it to my in-charge physio. If I'm the site lead at my site, other physios come and tell me that they saw such a thing happening, then it's my responsibility as the site leader, what I want to do, where I want to take it to the management or where I want to take it. So reporting is an obligation. It's your professional responsibility. You just can't avoid it. And the one more last point I'll just touch upon is health records. Overseas, in different countries, you have a certain number of years in which you maintain a health record. In Australia, it is 7 years. So if you are an adult patient, so example, if a patient, say 24 years old, your health record will be at my clinic till the time you turn 31. So example, if your patient, say, example, someone like say Rohit, so you're 24 today, your assessment has to be with me at my clinic till the next 7 years. After 7 years, I can shred it, not before 7 years. In terms of non-adult patients, it has to be till the time they turn 25. For example, if you see a patient of 15 years in a setup here, you have to maintain the patient records till the time the patient turns 25. So for the next 10 years. So this is really important because there are a lot of legal cases, there are a lot of funding issues here. So you have to have proper sort of a health record. Okay, so I think I would like to conclude it here. I would like Dr. Preeti or the faculty who is here to get into board, because I think the time has just passed. I really don't want to read all this. This is a lot of matter here, and I just don't want to keep reading it because I want the participation to be there. And I'm sure human mind can best concentrate most at 40 minutes. At 40 minutes, if you're concentrating more than 40 minutes, you're superhuman. So if you have paid attention to my entire talk for the last 50 minutes, you are not a normal human being, is what I'll say. Okay, so I would like to stop it, and I'll ask Dr. Preeti or the staff here to please, either involve the students with some question, or we can, as per what you would like. Yeah, I would not run through each every point. Anyone here?
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you. That's all right.
Very
If
nice.
there's any question, anyone can ask me. Yeah, if the time the staff or the this thing faculty come, you can ask me if there's anything to ask. Yes, sir.
Yeah, it was very nice session.
Thank you, sir. I try to keep it very simple. I don't want to make it a ethical session between 3 to 4. It will really get sedative, sir. I put myself in the student's place that if someone asked me to attend a webinar, I don't want to sleep attending a typical ethical presentation. So I just wanted to interact more. Yeah.
It was indeed a wonderful session, sir. Anybody has any queries can ask. If anybody has any queries, can ask the queries. Actually, during the session itself, students have asked most of the questions. So if no
It's a
queries,
it's a very big topic. So it
exactly,
really
sir.
cannot be addressed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But still, you covered almost everything, and it was indeed an informative session. So if no queries, we'll proceed with the vote of thanks, and that would be given by Dr. Ramandeep Kaur, who is Assistant Professor, DPUsNet College. So over to you, Dr. Ramandeep.
So on the behalf of DPUsNet College of Physiotherapy, I would like to propose vote of thanks to all the dignitaries out there. Firstly, a huge thanks to Dr. Ambrish Akre sir for spending your precious time and throwing the light on this topic of professional etiquettes and the code of conduct, which will improvise not only a clinical practice, but also the overall personality to be a successful physiotherapist.
I don't think I can hear you.
Excuse me, ma'am. Ma'am, we can't hear you.
Hello. You are not audible, madam.
Not a success. Hello, am I audible, sir?
Yeah. It's audible.
Yeah. So I would like to extend my gratitude to the principal, sir, Dr. Ajay Kumar, for mentoring us in the best possible ways. All the organizing committee members, Dr. Preeti Baikar, Dr. Rutika Patil, and Victoria Kuchin, for standing strong and making this webinar a success. Last but of course not the least, I would like to thank all the attendees for their presence and active participation. Also, I would like to inform the participants that we'll share a feedback form individually who have attended the session, and we would like to give the feedback form links later on so that e-certificates will be issued to each and everyone. Once again, thank you so much. And thank you so much, sir, for your precious time and very informative session. We would like to end the session now. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.